As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, when I get to the end, very often audience members have questions about what's next. They say this was very helpful and I really relate to the information that you shared, but what can I begin to do tomorrow in order to become more culturally competent? And what I do is I take the person who's asking the question back to the 4 stages that I shared with you, the 4 steps involved in becoming culturally competent. And I suggest go back to your place of work, go back to your home, and ask yourself, what am I aware of and what am I curious about when it comes to interacting with people of different cultures? Beverly Tatum Daniels wrote a book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Because her eye took in that information as she visited schools. She saw that black kids were sitting together in the cafeteria and she was curious about it. And so she began to unpack and investigate what was going on behind that. You may be curious, for example, about a parent who comes in a full burqa, black from head to toe with only the eyes showing. That may be something that you're really curious about. Is wearing a burqa an act of liberation, or is it a sign of imprisonment? And there are 2 different philosophies about that. But you need to make sense of that and have some understanding of that so that you can interact with this parent in a way that benefits the parent's child and your student. So I'm going to ask for some feedback from the audience. I'm going to pose this question to you. What are you aware of and what are you curious about as you go about your work, as you go about your daily life, when it comes to interacting with people of different cultures? Dr. Brown.
Hi, Darryle. First of all, great presentation.
Thanks.
I'm curious about kids today. What are your perceptions about their cultural competence in kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade?
At first blush, what I think is happening is I think they're pretty confused. And when you ask youngsters, particularly teenagers, about cultural competence, the first thing that they want you to know is that they haven't encountered any overt discrimination, that they would be very surprised if they were denied service or weren't allowed to go into a particular building. And so they immediately go to that part of cultural competence and don't see the nuances or the subtle kinds of ways that there's miscommunication between cultures and between races. So that's been my experience there. Ms. Grant-Goodman.
Yes. Darryle, I want to find out, you've been doing this presentation for some time now. How have your own views and opinions changed since you began this to the current day?
What I find is that my stories change as I read information, as I find out about things, and as I encounter things in the news. My stories tend to change. But what also has happened over the course of the 2 years that I've done this presentation is I have an appreciation for, dare I say, the solidity of the information that I'm presenting. I feel as though I'm on pretty firm ground because I presented to a wide variety of people, new educators, very seasoned educators, people in private industry, counselors, teachers, administrators. And because I'm getting the same positive feedback, and because I tend to hear the same kinds of things, it reinforces the points that I'm making and makes this presentation a bit more comfortable to give every time I feel as though I'm on pretty firm ground. Professor Jennings.
I think one of the questions that worry people the most is, what if I say something wrong? What if I make a mistake? What if I offend somebody through my curiosity? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. In fact, one of the things that thrills me is there is a body of work that's coming out now where you actually pick apart conversation. And people have studied reactions that people have during conversations, so we know what occurs. We know where the breakdown happens. And there are people who have written about what you do when that breakdown in communication occurs. For example, one of the tips that's often given is, if you feel as though you've said something that offends the other person, start by reflecting or summarizing the interaction. You know, I noticed that when I said that, the expression on your face changed. I'm wondering if there's something that I said when I said X, Y, Z that caused you to have this reaction. The beauty about doing that is, number one, it gives the person who has offended some time to recoup. And that person is recouping simply by repeating or summarizing what's occurred, so it's not like the person has to come up with any new information. And it gives the person on the receiving end, the person who may have had the negative reaction, an opportunity to really think about, ooh, what was my facial expression and what did I do that so clearly conveyed to this person that I was offended. So we've done enough of this kind of work, and there are enough linguists and people out there who've studied conversation between people to where we really have a body of tips or suggestions for when that breakdown occurs and when that uncomfortableness begins to arise. And so I encourage people who are embarking on this work to search resources that talk about human interactions and how people engage and eye contact and that kind of thing, because it's all there. It's just a matter of using it for the purpose of cross-cultural communication.
We have become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, different dreams. Jimmy Carter.